Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're ready to get started, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Carrie Bedrosian, and I am the Director of E-Learning Project Management at Southern New Hampshire University. I also have with me Nick Bratton and Libby Hayward, who are also project managers at SNHU. And we are here today to tell you about our course development process for producing online courses. We're going to talk about the things that we think we're really great at, and also some challenges that we have faced as we've been continuing to grow really quickly over the last few years. And finally, how we are leveraging technology in the form of workflow software in order to overcome those challenges and to continue to grow. So, a little bit of who we are. Southern New Hampshire University is the fastest growing college in North America. We actually have 3 verticals underneath our SNHU umbrella. One is our ground campus, which has about 3,000 students and is located about an hour north of here in Manchester, New Hampshire. Our second vertical is actually our newest vertical. It is called College for America, or CFA. It is competency-based online programs, offers both the both bachelor's and associate degrees, and at this point it's very popular with workforce professionals who want to further their career, their education, and often CFA is partnering with employers to do so. And last but certainly not least is the College of Online and Continuing Education, and that is the team that we're part of. If you ever see those snhu.edu commercials, that's us that they're referring to. So we have had a lot of growth in the last few years. To give some perspective, in early 2012, not too long after I started, we had just under 11,000 students and about 120 programs that we offered. And now, 2 years later, in 2014, we have over 200 programs, both in the undergrad and graduate space, and we have over 35,000 students. So we've had a lot of growth in a really short period of time, which is scary, but fun. And then most specifically, we are the project management team. And basically what we do is we oversee the online course development process. So we schedule courses in for when we know they need to launch to students each term, and we schedule in the entire process leading up to that point, about 37 weeks, which we will get into in a few moments. We are a fairly new team. We started out last summer, so a year that we've been a team within SNHU. It was just me, and it came out of a need of realizing that we were growing really quickly and having a lot of people and a lot of processes being added to our course development system, and we didn't have anybody overseeing the entire process and making sure that courses were ready for when students need them. We kind of just hoped they were done at the end. So I started doing that, and then not too long after, Nick and then Libby joined the team, and as of this month, we now have a total of 7 of us, so we are growing too. I also wanted to point out a little bit or define a little bit what we mean by course development, because I know sometimes that can mean different things to different people depending on your institution. I know, for instance, that a lot of schools have instructors who, when they are teaching a course, they choose the textbook and design their own content and their own course for it, even if different sections are being taught by different instructors. We do things a little bit differently, where we actually have a one-to-many course model. And what that means is we have an entire internal team that we'll talk about of people who design our courses, from the course outcomes to the critical task or summative assessment, all the formative assessments around it, choosing the learning resource, whether it's a textbook, e-text, what have you, discussions, and lectures or overviews, and all of that is designed in-house, and it's also built by our production team into Blackboard, which is our LMS. And so that becomes our one course model, or our master course, and we then copy that out into numerous sections depending on how many sections are needed for that term. And so an instructor, when they're teaching that course, they receive a fully completed course. And it's great for us because we can ensure a lot of consistency across our sections, especially as we're growing. We have, for instance, SNU 107 is one of our undergrad courses. It's kind of entry level, and we have over 70 sections every term running of that one course, so it's really necessary for us to have that kind of consistency. And it allows our instructors, our faculty members, which are both some full-time and as well as adjunct, to provide their real-world experience, their expertise, to provide additional resources as needed all throughout the discussions and announcements and everything else throughout our LMS. And it's been really great to have the best of both worlds in that case. So why we're here, I know I already mentioned this a little bit, but we wanted to talk a little bit about our fast-paced development process. In fact, each year we launch about 20 new programs. We're also talking about what we think we're awesome at, which is really getting courses done on time for when students and faculty need them, and not just getting them done, but getting high-quality, engaging, interactive courses each term. Some things that we're still working on, the challenges that as we have grown, some of those have been our visibility into our process. So as we've grown, we've got so many more stakeholders and people involved and processes involved. It has also meant that not people who are in this process don't always know where their courses are, where they are in the process, what they should be doing today, tomorrow, the next day. We kind of don't have visibility into that at this time. Another thing is organization. We definitely make decisions through our email inboxes, and so if you're not part of that email or if you're not in that inbox, then you don't always know what's going on. So we wanted a place where we had a single repository of all of our course development information. So that's how we're going to talk about how technology in the form of workflow software is allowing us to do that, to continue to grow and overcome those challenges. So our projects, as project managers, our projects are our courses. So to talk a little about it, our schedules are term-based. So as I discussed, we have our terms that we run about once a month. You can see there are 11 term starts over the course of 1 year. That means we have 6 undergraduate terms that are 9 weeks long each, and we have 5 graduate terms that are 10 weeks long. So basically every month we are starting up a new development cycle for those courses that are scheduled to launch in those terms. Another thing to keep in mind, even within our organization, I think there's sometimes confusion that when we develop a program, this is a great program, let's launch it, and we get the approval for it, and we decide to launch it in the September term, for instance. People assume that when we launch it, that all the courses in that program are designed, built, and ready to go for when the students need them. And though we wish that were the case, because we do so many programs each term, each year, for instance, we'll be doing 27 from September 2014 to September 2015, we can't develop all the courses in all the programs there. So what we do is we kind of have a long tail development schedule where we make sure we know how many courses, which is usually about 2 or 3, need to be launched when the program launches, and we make sure that those courses are ready. And then from there we schedule the next 2 or 3 for the next term, and so on until we have them all scheduled out. So it could take over a year or so to actually completely design and develop all of our courses in a program. So when we're talking about our projects that we're launching each term, we're talking about new courses from those new programs that we're scheduled to launch over the course of the next year. And we're also talking about new courses from the previous years that we're also launching that we're still developing the tail end of those courses. Finally, our project, the last part of our projects are our course revisions. So not only do we do new courses, but we also revise our existing courses. We have about 1,000 courses in our catalog right now, and we know they often need to be refreshed, and we actually have a process to decide which courses get redeveloped or revised every term, but it's basically due to things like age, if it hasn't been touched in a while, or we want to get a less expensive learning resource than is currently in there, or there's been new technology for anything for graphic design or any of those other programs. So really what we're talking about specifically for this year is we will have those 27 new or completely revised programs, as well as 40 concentrations launching in the next year. For what we have total scheduled then means 400 new courses in the next year that we'll be developing, and those again are new from this year as well as new from previous years, and 250 scheduled revisions for existing courses, which means we'll have a total of 650 projects or courses that we will be developing in the next year. Break that down across our 11 terms, and we try to keep at about 60 projects or courses that we are launching each term. A lot of numbers, but... And now Nick is going to talk a little bit about the stakeholders in the process, and then we'll take you through the process itself.
Thank you, Carrie. Actually, I'm not going to stand by that microphone because I'm already mic'd up. So I'm Nick Bratton, as Carrie just said. So our stakeholders, these are the primary stakeholders within the academic team that are involved in the course development process. The top bullet consists of the executive directors, which are overseeing our individual curriculum teams and really providing the direction for how each curriculum team is going to operate. Libby's going to elaborate a little bit more on the makeup of our curricular teams in a couple of slides. The associate deans are really concerned, they're looking at our courses at more of a programmatic view. So they're really ensuring that all our newly developed courses and our redesigned courses are being designed with outcomes that are going to properly scaffold to the programmatic outcomes. And the assistant deans are kind of more at a granular level, looking at the course-to-course issues. So as Carrie alluded to in the previous slide, we're redeveloping roughly 60 courses per term. So the assistant deans are looking into some of the issues such as outdated resources, design issues, any kind of things that are really causing problems with the student and reasons for redevelopment. The assistant deans are on the forefront of that part of the process in determining what we're going to redevelop. Our outcome and assessment team is a relatively new team. It also, along with Project, popped up within the last couple of years, and they are primarily focused on our newly developed courses and programs. So they're upfront designing the outcomes for these courses, and as well as the critical task. And the critical task, when we say that, we're basically referring to the final project for a course. And then the learning resources team. By show of hands, who here, whose institution has a learning resources team?
What is a learning resources?
Okay, I can explain what SNU's learning resources team is. So I saw two hands out there, just for the record. This is, again, another new team for us. So the purpose of this team, when SNU was starting this team, was to basically provide people who can be on the front lines for integrating third-party resources. And essentially, when I say that, I mean interactive resources that are going to provide student with real-time feedback to really enhance the learning experience, so they're not waiting for their instructor to log in the next day to give them an answer, feedback on their homework, if it's, be it a multiple choice question or something like that. They're also doing things such as driving down, lowering the cost for textbooks. We're amongst some of the lowest in the industry. And they're also just constantly looking for new and innovative technologies. As we all know in this room, there's a bunch of new resources out there, and our learning resources team does a great job at really determining upfront whether it makes sense for us to be spending time and money at implementing those into our courses. Next up is our instructional designers. And now I want to jump ahead a little bit. The instructional designers are going to work with our subject matter experts down here. I wanted to use the laser pointer there. And our instructional designers pair along with our subject matter experts so that they can, the subject matter experts essentially deliver the content for a course. And the instructional designers use their design know-how to ensure that it's properly designed within our courses. Next up is our production team. And our production team is taking the documents that is handed off from our instructional designers and our outcomes and assessment team, and they are editing those documents, and then they are building them into the LMS, which in Southern New Hampshire University's case is Blackboard. And some of the supporting teams, I already described their subject matter experts, but our faculty recruitment team is in charge of reaching out to our subject matter experts and making sure that they're academically qualified and that they're interested in our potential projects that are coming up. And our scheduling team, which is going to be assigning instructors to courses and making sure that our SMEs are within their workload to work with us. And then finally, our program launch team, which is doing some of the upfront work at designing kind of the program outlook and laying the framework for how that program is going to be launched and what terms. And those are our stakeholders.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So are these all roles and responsibilities or individual people?
These are individual teams, actually.
Okay.
Yep.
Teams of people.
So,
Yep.
so one person wouldn't bridge two of these?
No, but when we elaborate a little bit on our curricular team structure, I think that will make a little bit more sense to you.
Great.
No problem. Sure.
Could you define what program is?
Sure. So a program is basically it's a group of courses that the students take. So at the end, they have their bachelor's or master's degree. So, for instance, a bachelor's in environmental science, or an MA in English. Those are the programs that we are launching. That's composed of all the courses that we then develop for that program. Sure. Okay, so here is the process that we're project managing that we've kind of talked about. So we'll each go through a piece of it. It's kind of hard to see, but we'll walk through as much as and say as much as we can about it. It's kind of a high-level view. It doesn't have all the tasks written out or anything like that, but it's kind of how we broke down the different phases of our development so people can understand what we're talking about when we're talking about these phases. One thing to note is you might notice the odd numbering of our phases. That really came about just because when we were first figuring out what we were doing and what our development looked like, we knew there were 3 phases. There was pre-design, there was design, and there was production and review. And those were phases 1, 2, and 3. And then as we got more into it, we realized that we actually were doing stuff before phase 1, and so we named that phase 0. And then we actually knew we were even doing stuff before that, and that's why it became phase -1, so the numbering just stuck. But it's not that they're unimportant or anything like that. It's just stuck.
If you get your stakeholders to buy into 1, 2, and 3, you keep that. You make
Yeah,
up
we
new
weren't
processes
going to
from
mess
there.
with that. So I'll begin by talking a little bit about the program level development, and really we're not directly involved in that piece of it, but it helps to have context when we talk about the course development. So when we're talking about programs, it's really our academic team along with marketing and our program launch team deciding what programs they want to launch in the next year based on what the market's out there and what our academic team wants to do. And once that's decided on, we first have a program workshop. And that is about 2 to 3 days, and it has our higher level subject matter experts, or SMEs, attend those as well as all the academic stakeholders and our program launch team. And what they're doing is they're really figuring out the curriculum for that program. So if we have our program outcomes, what courses, what curriculum should be there in order for students to come out with a degree in this program. And so that's where all that data is being taken from our subject matter experts and from our academic team. Next is phase -1, and that's about a month long, about 4 weeks, where that data is being taken and put into a program proposal. And that's the stuff that we care about for course development, because that's when we know exactly the number of courses and what courses will be in that program, so everything from the course codes and the course titles and the course descriptions, as well as when they would plan to launch each one of those courses within that program. So knowing that the first will be the first term that they want to launch, and then so on, so we can start scheduling. And that ends with it being approved at our governing body, which is called C3. And then once the program is approved, we are ready for course development to begin, and I'll let Libby take over.
So after our approval at C3, we take the information that they have approved, so it would be the course codes, the course titles, and the description of each individual course, and we give it to our faculty recruiting team. And they're actually out there recruiting SMEs for 2 separate phases of development. They make sure that they are academically qualified to do this work, and as well as that they're actually interested to take on this work and this project. So they work for about 8 weeks to recruit all these SMEs for all the projects for the upcoming term. And once that is completed, we move into phase 1. There are actually 3 major steps in phase 1. The first would be that the Outcomes and Assessment Specialist works with the subject matter expert to create the course specification document, or the CSD. So what they do on this document is they take the information that has been approved at the program level, and they write out outcomes for the end of the course as well as the critical task or final assessment. While this is happening, we also have faculty recruitment, again, stepping in and finding SMEs for not only for the phase 1 work, but as well as phase 2. So as soon as the SME and the Outcomes and Assessment Specialist has completed the course specification document, we send it to our learning resource teams. And there they're able to see sort of the outline of the entire course and able to vet to some of our third-party vendors, find appropriate textbooks, or any new resources that could enhance this course. So right at the end of phase 1, there's really 3 things we want. We would like a subject matter expert for phase 2, a completed CSD, and a learning resource on board and ready to go. And once all of those have been completed, we move into phase 2.
Which phase 2, is this on? is the design phase, where our instructional design team is going to be working alongside our subject matter experts that the faculty recruitment team has graciously acquired for us. Now, there are basically two different kinds of projects that can happen in phase 2. You either have a newly developed course where the outcomes and assessment team has handed off a course specification document for them to begin, which provides the framework for how the course will be built. Or it's a completely redeveloped course where the SME and the ID are essentially starting from scratch and building the course according to the dean's vision. Either way, there are 3 deliverables that are coming out of this in this order. So early on in the design phase, the ID and SME are delivering a course plan to the dean, which is essentially going to outline, I describe it as kind of the 30,000-foot view of the course, the major milestones that will be met, the topic coverage week to week, so the dean has a good conceptualized framework for how the design will proceed. And then from there, the ID and SME begin designing the course blueprint, which is the week-to-week modules, the topic coverage, the delivery vehicles that students will be assessed with, and the final project document, which, if it's a newly developed course, is already embodied within the course specification document. Now, all those documents are then handed off into phase 3, which is our production team. And as I described earlier, our production team is going to do a full editorial review of these, and then they are going to hand them off to our content architects, who are then going to take these documents and build them into Blackboard. And this becomes a pretty collaborative process where the editors or the content architects are going back to the subject matter expert and ID as needed to ensure that they're really building it within Blackboard how they had envisioned when they were designing. And after that process is complete, we are ready for the course to be rolled over, which happens 3 weeks prior to term start, so that 3 weeks prior to the course going to term beginning, our instructors have the opportunity to really get in and become acquainted with the course, the material that they're going to be delivering to students. And a week later, our students are actually in the course. And 2 weeks from there, the course is beginning. We're off on that term.
So that's a really high-level look at what we're doing for 37 weeks starting after a program is approved at C3.
So the process that we just described and went through, we do for about 60 courses every single term. And this is just a quick snapshot into our year. The yellow is our undergraduate terms and the blue is our graduate terms. So you can actually see how many times we start this process and this entire cycle within 1 year. It is 11 times, and I think what's very important to note is that we don't start at phase -1, move to 0, 1, 2, 3, stop, and then start -1 again. We are in all phases at all times. So we're always moving through it.
We're always busy.
So because we're growing so quickly, we've run into a number of challenges just at the expanse of the university. One of the major challenges we've found are multiple static spreadsheets. So for tracking information in the projects that we're working on for every term, I know myself, I have 3 or 4 Excel documents on my desktop, and I'm sure everyone at Southern New Hampshire could say the same thing. So what that leaves us with is inconsistent and lost information because nobody has a live look into where courses are or what's actually going on. Another issue that we're having is conversations and decisions get made in email inboxes. So if you are not in that inbox and you were not in that email chain, you might not have the right up-to-date information or know that information at all. So we really needed to find a way to make sure that everyone knows all the information at all times. This will ensure that our stakeholders know where their projects are, make sure it's on time for delivery, and that if there's a task someone needs to do in the process, that they know when it's time to do that. One other problem we've run into is that has been incredibly hard to train new hires into our team because not only are we showing them all my spreadsheets and all Nick's spreadsheets and spreadsheets that the whole university uses, there inconsistency across the board. So the way in which we solved these problems is the first thing is we came up with curriculum team structure. So we have 6 curriculum teams at Southern New Hampshire. We have undergrad business, grad business, nursing and healthcare professions, liberal arts, social sciences, education, and STEM. So we take those sort of dean units with the executive director, the associate dean, the assistant dean, and they're each over their own curriculum team. And underneath them, we have all the stakeholders that Nick talked about earlier. There is an instructional designer, an outcomes and assessment specialist, a project manager, a content architect, a learning resource manager. And so instead of having this process where someone does their part and they hand it to the next part and then they do their part and they hand it on, it's sort of a cohesion between the entire group, so conversations keep going, and it has made for a lot less error and a lot more overall vision in the courses. So once we've broken it down into these curricular teams, we needed to make sure that they operate on the same framework across the entire academic team. So we had to come up with a framework and a way in which that all teams could operate so that we would be all on the same page, meeting the same deadlines and goals. And a very important one is a centralized repository for information. So we're moving away from these static spreadsheets, and there is one place where all the information can live, and it's always correct in real-time information. And finally was the ease of use, to just have everyone who already works there be trained and have it be easy, and for new hires coming on board, that it won't be sort of a pull your hair out process. It'll all be right there for you.
Question? Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Just curious, what do you use for that central repository?
We're about to tell you.
Coming up. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, we actually hired him to be in the crowd. Thank you. Transitioning. So, how technology is accelerating our success. So, Libby described some of the pain points that we're having thus far with our process. Before I get too into how CoMindware is going to, that's the name of the workflow software that we're implementing, is going to help us alleviate some of these issues. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on how we had looked at a variety of different workflow software systems. And being in higher education, we're all well aware of the unique processes that each university operates under. And a lot of workflow management systems aren't really fine-tuned to the higher education process, at least specifically to SNU. I see some chuckles in the crowd there. We had looked at things such as Microsoft SharePoint, which was going to do a great job at about 75% of the functionality that we needed, but it's really that other 25% that we were looking for. We need an all or nothing. We're not looking to implement 75% of anything. We looked at a few others that were just basically too complicated for the users. We didn't want to go down that road. So some of the key aspects that we were looking for first one is transparency. As Carrie alluded to earlier, SNU, Southern New Hampshire University, is the fastest growing college in North America. And we have had to grow our employee base to meet the growing student needs. And with all these new hires coming on board and the complexities of this process that we've described thus far, we really wanted to be able to present them with a snapshot of what our process looks like from start to finish, as well as any currently existing employees, give them the opportunity to see where a course or a project is in this cycle and where it's going to be coming down the line, so they can kind of get some insight as to when they're really going to become involved in the process. The next thing is the centralized information, so the centralized system. As I said before, it's CoMindware, and we build the course information into each task, which is essentially going to follow a workflow process that I will show you in the next slide. And now this centralization of information is vital for a few reasons. One being that if an individual wanted to look at a project and see a variety of information, they were going to one place to find the learning resource information for that project. They were going to another place to find the governance dates. They were going to another place to find out what term and what kind of project it actually was and who was assigned to that project. At the rate that we're growing right now, that's just not sustainable, it's not effective, and it's not efficient at all. So CoMindware is really going to help house a lot of that information in regards to the projects. The other aspect of centralizing that information is, Libby and Carrie both said here, a lot of our conversations pertaining to our projects and our courses, was being housed in email inboxes. So, you can search for keywords and find out where the last piece of the conversation left off, but you can't see the breadcrumbs before that. So CombinedWare offers a central repository where all the discussions pertaining to that course is going on. Automated notifications, that's pretty self-explanatory. We wanted our users to be able to log into a system and see a list of every task that they need to do for that project. And CombinedWare has a plugin that integrates directly with Microsoft Outlook, which we're already working with. So we're just going to be downloading that plugin to each individual's Outlook, and they can click on a button and see all the tasks that they have to do. That makes me smile. I don't know if it makes anybody out there smile. And document versioning. So as we were talking about the massive number of courses that we're developing year to year and term to term, as you all can imagine, there are a lot of work in process documents out there. And trying to decipher who was the last to edit this course specification document and who's the sole owner of this document, CombinedWare offers the opportunity to version these documents so that when it's uploaded with the same naming convention, it gives a timestamp of when that was uploaded, by whom, and what edits were made. And finally, the data and reporting. We all know the importance, the increasing importance put on data and reporting. So CombinedWare, any kind of data that we want to report on, any kind of information, it's fully customizable, and we are inputting all of this into the system. So as I've, sorry to be redundant, but governance dates, project types, these kind of things, we're going to be able to extract reports for upper management and give them the ability to have that vision into each project and where it is in the process without having to really micromanage or have these weekly Scrum meetings to really make sure that people are essentially doing their job. So yeah, that's, yeah. So now a bit of what CombinedWare looks like. So this is just a snapshot of our one of our workflows. This is actually a SME acquisition workflow. And as you can see, so we have hundreds of courses that we're developing. And we're not going to develop a workflow for each one of these courses. So basically the way that this works is the system is intuitive enough to know that the assistant dean is going to be the owner for this task. So for accounting courses, it will know that that belongs to this assistant dean. And for economics courses, it might be belonging to a separate dean. So it's intuitive enough to adapt to each user and assign them the tasks so that we don't have to really be too concerned with the specifics of each course, I guess.
And how to allow the transparency.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. And obviously, yes. And the transparency. So as each one of these are built out, any user can come in, and there will be kind of a gold ring around each one to give you an idea of where it is in the process. So say I'm 6 steps down the line from this, I have a rough estimation of when I'm coming into the process and when I need to start, I guess, getting my ducks in line, for lack of a better term. Now, the centralized information, this to me personally is the most important aspect. As I alluded to earlier, so you have your project type, your term, the CSD development type, the SME start dates, and there's a participants tab down here. So you can see who's assigned to what project, what term is it launching, what's the learning resource going to be for this course. So it's all in that one central location. And you don't have to dig around for that. And then even further, there is.
Oh, and I was going to mention
sure.
on any form or any entry into this form that you make, that's what you can get a report on. So you can report on all courses in this term or all courses for this assistant dean or this assistant dean that are late. You can report on anything that you put into this system or into this data form, which is great for us. There you go.
Yeah. And then the other end of the centralizing of information is the conversations pertaining to the course. So as you can see here, 2 fantastically collaborative employees that may or may not be sitting up on this stage right now. We're discussing a project that they're currently working on. And it basically is going to contain the story of that course and any deliverable, any decisions that were made, any conversations that might have happened are all going to be in one central location and are going to build off the next. It's pretty awesome stuff. The automated notification. So this is a screenshot of what users' Microsoft Outlook is going to look like. So it comes in and it will tell them when the due date is, what the actual title of the task is, and if a user is to be does not deliver something on time, the first thing that happens is it goes red so that everybody can see, and we can set up the system so that their managers are notified. So should they have had to have left the office in a rush, or they've gone on vacation and something slipped their mind, the university is aware of it. As well as it's worth mentioning that since this is going to be used across the entire academic team, each team's going to be more concerned with specific sets of information. So this interface is completely customizable to whatever information that user wants to see. So as long as we know to input it into the form, which we saw in the last slide, we can have that displayed up here so each team can see what information is important to them. Now the document versioning, this is pretty self-explanatory, but so the work in process documents are all going to be held within here. And as long as it's uploaded to CoMindWare with the same exact naming convention, you can see right now it says the author is the administrator for demonstration purposes, but it will have the user's name, and if you hover, you can see the date, and you can hover over it and get some other key details that are customizable as well. But essentially, this is it's alleviating that headache of comparing and contrasting, the same document and just trying to figure out when was this last saved and what was the last edit made on this. And then finally, as Carrie described earlier, all the information that is input into that form is we can report on. So this is just a basic Excel report where we extracted who the assigned outcomes and assessment specialist is, what the due date is, what the title of the course is, and the status. So you can see whether it started or not. And our users can also click on these hyperlinks over here, and it will take them exactly to that task. So they can see, the bigger conversation that's going on with it, and any further information that kind of pops into their brain at that moment if they want to know, oh, well, what term does this launch? And it doesn't say it in the report. And it's also worth mentioning that these reports can be scheduled. So if your manager wants a report on something every Friday at 3 o'clock, it's very simple to set up so that they get the same report every Friday at 3 o'clock. And that
So that is everything.
is our presentation.
So thank you for listening. As you can see, the use of CoMindWare is one example of how we've been able to take a really, I don't want to say messy, but a really big and complicated process and be able to have all the information we need in one place and to be able to see what we need to see at any given time. So it's a little early. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Go ahead.
In your title, you sort of touched on what I think is a little tension sometimes between creativity of creating these things, the material that goes with them, and the scheduling of them and the management of dates. And I wondered what were your thoughts on that?
Definitely. That's been part of it, too, was the fact that as we were having all these processes put into place, it was very much get this done, just get this done, and then this done. And we weren't able to really take the time to think about what technology or what learning resources or what additional things that we can use to actually enhance the course. So part of that has been able to, as we have these phases actually outlined and have more visibility into the system by having this kind of workflow, we now actually have a multimedia team and other learning resources team where they are able to see ahead of time what the projects are, what the needs are. So we're able to do that as soon as we have a course specification document created, because that means we have the course outcomes, and then we can find out whether it's an interactive video or a simulation or some other creative and engaging content that we want to create beyond a short paper or a PDF lecture or whatever it is, that we can have the time, now that we know when things are happening, that after we have the CSD created, we can have a multimedia team and instructional designer working together at the beginning to be able to identify those key things. And we weren't able to before because we were always it was just a handoff or a pass off to here's the information, just do it. And now that we've been able to actually point out places where we can identify places where we can enhance the content. Sure.
Can you just talk a little bit about this, kind of relates to what you just talked about, how the subject matter expert works with those instructional resource, learning resource people, like
Sure. Did you want to talk about it?
So our subject matter experts, I'll just turn around, work with our instructional designers, and I really think the best way to describe it, it's their subject knowledge of the content, but the instructional designers' knowledge of Southern New Hampshire University, what we need for our online courses, and how to deliver things in the online format. So it's really a collaboration between the two of them. In terms of the learning resource, we generally have the subject matter expert have they usually suggest the textbook. We generally go with what they suggest. It does have to go through an approval process to look for things like, is it available to students? Is there an online version of it? In terms of vendor courseware and third-party vendors, that's not always something the subject matter expert has a say in, but when they start designing with the instructional designer, they do work with them to pull the best content from those vendors they can.
So I was surprised to hear you say that the subject matter expert could be different in phase 2 and phase 3.
Or yeah, close. Yeah, with phase 1 and phase 2.
So can you talk about that? Why can they be different, or are they always?
No, we ideally want them to be the same person, and we try as hard as we can using with our faculty recruitment team to make sure that happens. The times when it's not possible is because we didn't get into it too much detail, but when we develop in phase 1, when we use a subject matter expert to develop the outcomes and assessments, it is often or ideally done in a workshop format, so it's synchronous. So we're actually bringing people from all over in because we get kind of more bang for our buck. We get a lot of heads, we get a lot of people working, and then the other thing is they can work on more than one course rather than asynchronous one-on-one. So if we get them in and they can do that, that's great, but especially if they're able to do 2 to 3 courses is ideal. But that means when they do come on to phase 2 to do the phase 2 design with the instructional designer, they can't do more than one course at a time. So that's when it becomes kind of impossible. But ideally we want it to be that same person to keep that continuity. And it's always been great when we're able to do that.
When you were talking about multimedia, at what point do you decide that you want to add a video into the course? Is that something that you start at the beginning, or are you just kind of like, hey, let's add a video here?
Sure, no, as early as possible so that we have enough resources as possible. We realized that as we were doing our criminal justice program, and someone at the end of the line said, let's put in videos. We said, oh, we don't have time. We're over here in phase 3. But so ideally at the program workshop, if anyone there knows, oh, we could do a small movie or a video for this, that we actually have learning resource, the people on the learning resource team attending these to gather all that information. And then when we get to the course level at that phase 1 where they're developing the course specification documents, we're also gathering that information from the subject matter experts and from the academic stakeholders. And at that point, that's again when our learning resource team is also there to get that information and to start building a portfolio or to start saying, okay, let's work with our multimedia team to build something out from scratch. Should you have?
Yeah, is that something that I'll ask you later.
Okay, sure. Sure.
So, just curious, how long, maybe let me rephrase this. 10,000-foot view.
Yeah.
What did it take to implement this? So you're talking about software implementation, you're talking about change in methodology, you're talking about getting existing faculty, staff to buy into new process, new technology. So 10,000-foot view, did it take a year? Did it take 10?
For the specific of the software implementation, the
Not
workflow?
specific to software,
Okay.
but as a whole, I mean, I'm sure this grew organically.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
just in general, like, maybe lessons learned, maybe just, what did it take to get to this point?
Sure. So it was a bit organically. In fact, when I started in 2012, we only did a handful of courses every term. It was a much smaller team, and everyone could be hands-on in what they were doing. And as we were growing and adding an entire outcomes and assessment team and adding an entire learning resources team, we were kind of tacking on those processes, but we weren't expanding the timeline, and we were running into things that we were extremely late with a lot of our courses, which is really hard when you have a term start with students in them. So it actually became where we sat down, the key phase stakeholders, we call them, each of the teams, those different phases, and we said, let's map out what we're doing. And then let's go to our bosses and say, this is how long it's actually going to take us to do what we do. And that was hard, and there was a lot of back and forth. But I think we had a good enough pitch that they actually said, okay, I think at some point we were doing this in 5 or 6 months, and now it's extended to 9 months to really get all the stuff that we need to do done. So it has been a little difficult, especially with our deans who've been around for a while, and they're so used to picking the textbook and picking the faculty member, picking that, and that's been a newer thing too, where we're actually saying you can still own the classroom, because that's what we tell our deans, you own the classroom, but you have to trust your curricular teams that if you provide your vision up front, that they can execute the rest of the phases. So that has been actually really recently in the last few months or so that we've been really acting on that. As for the software piece, we just finished our proof of concept on it, decided to move forward, and Nick is our actual co-Mindware project manager who will be going through and training all of the teams in all different functional areas to get them going fully, to have all of our courses in there. So it's not there yet, but we're almost there.
I think the gentleman in the back.
Oh, sure.
How many instructional designers do you have?
10?
We,
I believe we have, I really should know this. We have around 7 to 10, I believe. We also have a network of IDs that we use. So we have our internal IDs, and then we have a vendor partner who we've been working with for years, who we can give courses to, also develop it, just do that phase 2, just that design with the SME. And we are also building out a network of across the nation of people who can help us as needed. So to help with our ebbs and flows, that we have people out there. Sure.
So how do you train faculty to teach the course once you have it developed? Or do you?
We have a faculty training department too, as well, faculty training and then support as well. So when it's a whole process that is not on our team, but from what I know, they come on as new faculty, they get trained, they actually go through a Blackboard course where they get trained on our SNHU culture and who we are, their expectations, and also Blackboard and working through it. As for course specific, when we have different learning resources, different vendor products, we train them specifically on that so they know how to go in and to use it, how to help their students use it, how to do the grading and everything like that. And we also have, one great thing is we have a design feedback system, and that's part of our production team where they get feedback from instructors teaching the course, and we are constantly making improvements to improve the course in real time as much as possible. So it's everything from this link is broken, or this is misnamed, mistitled, or this submission isn't working, up to there's too much work in here, this content doesn't align to this chapter text that you have assigned to them for this week, and we can go in and actually update in real time. So we're not only training them, but then we're getting feedback from them in order to improve our courses daily. Sure.
You mentioned that you seem to be organizing kind of in a hierarchical way, where you have instructional designers inside each department or
Curricular team. Yep.
That's right. That is across the board, or do you have a kind of a center for teaching and learning? And how is your structure?
Sure.
Kind of relates to the rest of the faculty?
Sure. So this is we're talking about our entire academic team. So they are the ones that we each have our own team. Like I have my entire project management team, but we just say, okay, you are that point person for that curricular team so that you know the ins and outs of those courses every day. And that's how each department is. Each has that outcomes and assessment specialist. Each one has that content architect and that instructional designer, that they are working in the same team together. They're part of their functional team, but they come together as a group to work on these courses. So it's more of an informal thing. They have status meetings and Agile Scrum meetings as needed to move forward. But they are also part of their own functional teams as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I think to expand a little bit more on that, just because you are the instructional designer for the STEM team does not mean you're specifically designated to design courses within the STEM program. As different teams grow at different speeds, the instructional designers are assigned as needed. But we try to keep it within that framework for reasons such as, the instructional designers are stronger in the math area, so they're going to have a better sense of how to design a math course. But as needed, they will work on other courses.
Sure.
I have two questions. One is, this sounds awesome. I mean, you guys have a ton of resources, and it's really impressive what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I wonder how you would scale this for smaller organizations kind of give something that's nice to have, but not a necessity?
To answer that first, it's definitely that second one. We do, as Nick was talking about, we have a math person. She was math, and then she became a structural designer. We said, well, you're doing all the math courses, and they have the background, but it doesn't always happen that way. We have a lead instructional designer who actually oversees 2 curriculum teams right now, so he's looking at STEM courses as well as health professions, which are 2 totally different things. But as long as we are getting good subject matter experts from our faculty recruitment team who are good in the field and can provide us the content, it's really just taking that content and molding it into an instructionally sound course for our students. And then you would ask about scaling down maybe if you didn't have all the resources that we just talked about. Even at the very beginning when we were smaller, it was just that our instructional designers also built in Blackboard. They did both. They read through it and did it themselves. Our deans picked out. We didn't have a learning resource team. We just said, hey, which textbook do you want to use for this course? We didn't have an outcomes assessment team, so that was outcomes and the final project were developed as part of phase 2, as part of the entire course design. So we really started out where it was kind of 1 or 2 teams doing everything. It's ourselves, and just really realizing that we, SNHU and academics, is that we want to have the best online learning experience in the world. That's our goal. And so how we're doing that is by acting on that, by investing in the resources we think most important to have really good, strong courses.
So the term instructional designer, referring to like the title, has a whole bunch of different meanings based on the person, the university. When you use that term, are you referring to the full process, creating the full process that a student or a faculty member might go through when they're creating a course, and referring to it more as actually building out that Blackboard class because someone else is telling them how to build it? Or how are you defining that?
Sure, great question. So what we're talking about, the instructional designer, is actually designing the course given the course specification document that was developed by our outcomes and assessment team. So they have to start with the course outcomes and that critical or summative task, that final project, or maybe it's a research paper, or even an exam if it's quantitative. And they're taking that and they are working with the subject matter expert to build everything around it, all the formative assignments. So we have a lot of discussions and group work. It could be quizzes, short papers, anything like that. They're also building out we call them overviews or lectures, but kind of that content that here's what we're talking about this week kind of stuff. And all of the grading, all the rubrics for the formative assignment. So they are doing all that instructional design work. It ends up being in a Word document, a blueprint, that is then handed over to our production team who does the actual building in Blackboard based on the design given by the instructional designers. That's it. Thank you very much for. Oh, sorry.
We got one last one.
Sorry, very interesting, by the way.
Thank you.
Very,
Oh, great.
a lot of information. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you not find that there are courses that you run, particularly graduate courses, where the content itself is so difficult to understand that satellite instructional designers and content architects and other people you describe can't build outcomes and assessments simply because like graduate statistics comes to mind? Do you have to find these satellite instructional designers who have the same subject matter expertise?
No, not really the instructional designers, but the subject matter experts, and that's where it can get really difficult. And with our faculty recruitment team, especially when we have brand new programs that we've never seen before, and we don't have any pool of. A lot of our subject matter experts are our instructors, our adjunct faculty. But when we're starting something brand new, that means we don't have anybody in our pool, and they have to do a lot of work. They go to associations. You might know more about this than I do, but they go to a lot of associations and different places to actually find people who are experts in this field and bring them to work with our instructional designers to provide the content that we can then put into into a course.
We do find it very difficult with programs such as our new data analytics program, where it's the people that have the knowledge to give us this content. They are not educators at all. So it's really that battle between getting the awesome content that we need for this course, but having them deliver it in a way that can be transcribed into a way a student could learn it. So it's really those programs where I don't want to say it's more employment-based, because, the goal, field-based, yeah. So it's, for history, most of the subject matter experts are historians and professors, but For other ones like data analytics, it's definitely a challenge to find those people.
And to add to that a little bit, with some of these more complex courses that more of these niche programs, we're going to primarily assign a lot of that in-house so that we can keep a closer eye on that. But just to add a little bit to these satellite instructional designers, every satellite or network instructional designer that we use is paired alongside an in-house lead instructional designer that's been with us for a long time. So they're well versed in this new model, and any kind of issue, they're taking place on these check-in calls. So any kind of issues that arise, we can really identify those up front and address those as needed. If it needs to come back in-house, we'll take it back in-house and proceed accordingly.
Well, oh, sure.
Once the instructor starts teaching the course, do they have to wait a full cycle for revision? So, for example, if I'm teaching a course and I see that, this learning resource is not added, can I go ahead and add it, or does it have to go through this whole process and wait?
That's where our design feedback comes into play. They have a link to, we have a ticketing system that our faculty can use, our advisors can use because they talk a lot with our students. All of our academic team can use it to actually fill out any issues or problems they have with the course. We have people we have a whole team dedicated to design feedback who receive these tickets, act on them as needed right away. So if it's something that's completely broken, the students cannot complete the course, fix it right away. If it's something that requires a subject matter expert, we work to get them on and to help us and fix out if it's an alignment or content issue. And then lastly, if it's like a nice to have, like this would be really better if you did this, we kind of save those tickets, and then when we do come up for revision, we incorporate those.
But we do encourage our instructors to add their own resources as they see fit, with the caveat that because we use the one-to-many model where you have that master course and clones are essentially populated off of that, because you add the resource to your course, it's not necessarily going to roll over into the next term. But for your term, it serves its purpose.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.